I don't want to live consumed with myself and how far I get. What kind of living is this? Are we taught that it's better to receive or better to give? Yes, I just quoted the song that I just played for you. Yes, it's a good song. So good to see you guys. Welcome to week 2 of this strange little adventure that we're going on. Absolute pleasure to join you on this lovely evening. That song was Obsession with Eyes by Lovekin. Big fan of that song. I have it on my playlist playing quite a lot because, man, it's so easy to fall in that trap of caring about what other people think. I wonder what we're going to talk about today. Wow. Okay. Let's kind of before we get started, though, let's do a quick set of reminders. You can see it there. Like I said last week, treat it like a class. You are your own best advocate in taking away what you want to take away from this. When it comes to asking questions, if you want to ask me in the chat, I have the chat open as well. If you don't feel comfortable asking for everyone else, but hopefully you will. And when there's need for participation, please participate. It helps me. It helps your peers. And so that's kind of what we want to go for. With that said, let's also do a quick review of the quote-unquote homework. We covered a little bit, as you guys did already. For those of you who turned it in, thank you very much. I was able to grade it and get it back to you with some comments if they were warranted. We had these two situations, and I asked you to find the primary, secondary goals for them, and then also some means and metrics for how to measure how successful you are at achieving those goals. Overall, very happy with the responses. Everyone did a really good job. Most people kind of hit the primary goal is for the first situation is just cleaning up, right? Nice and simple. And the second goal, in our case, in Sierra Vista's interest, is to get student performance numbers to make the teams. Some version of that was fantastic. There were some secondary goals I actually really liked, and so I have a few pulled up here. For the first two, or for the first three are actually for situation 1, the second one for situation 2. Keeping students from going crazy by giving them something to do. Yeah, that is a good one because, man, that's so true. People want to feel like they're doing something, and if they're not doing something, they feel bored or distracted or something chaotic. And so absolutely, a secondary goal of cleaning is to give people something to do so they feel like they're involved. Cleaning up as fast as possible. That's a great one because our goal, technically, right, if you look just verbatim at the wording, our goal is to clean the campsite. But cleaning it quickly, efficiently, is definitely something we can keep in mind as we're doing it. Only one person said practicing leadership and communication skills. That is always an answer. Always an answer. And so I'm glad that someone brought that up. And for the second situation with the scrimmage, doesn't that just warm your heart? Isn't that just a lovely answer? Spreading love of science to all those who have an interest. Yes, absolutely. I really enjoy any kind of answer like that. With that said, thank you for doing that. We'll have, again, the goal is to make those assignments very much doable, easy, not busy work, but to get you to think about some issues kind of in a new light. And by making it a homework assignment, it gets you in the mood to actually do it, rather than sitting at the bottom of all the busy things that you have to do with your time. With that said, I hope you have something to take notes with. Let's kind of transition into the first chapter of this week's discussion. Confidence and courage. Our goal is to identify the social components of confidence and adjust our behavior accordingly. The social components of confidence. A phrasing you've probably never heard before, mainly because I made it up, but also it's something that we don't really think about. Like, we think of our confidence as myself, but hopefully we can kind of lead to a discussion about the role confidence plays in interacting with others. We all have this kind of feeling where we do something, we want to do something, paralyzed, shocked, not sure what to do. Hopefully we can kind of address that today. And the reason I wanted to start with this, actually, I feel like this is maybe the concepts behind getting confidence for yourself is possibly the most important thing I have planned in this whole curriculum, which is why it's kind of daunting to do it as like the start of the second lesson. But I'm hoping that I'll be able to kind of communicate some nuggets or points that you can maybe take away and apply to whatever situation you come across in which you might need a little bit more confidence to do something. we have kind of a general guiding principle for this discussion, and I think you'll agree that emotions and reason do not always line up. How we feel about a situation does not always align with the facts of the situation. Would we agree that's generally true, right? Our emotions oftentimes exaggerate something that is less of a threat than they make it out to be. Our emotions oftentimes kind of lead us down this avalanche, this spiral of fear or of anger or of something of that nature. And that doesn't always line up with the facts of the situation. And so hopefully what we can talk about today is focusing our idea of confidence towards the facts of a situation, and perhaps giving us a little bit more confidence to actually do that and kind of fight through those weird emotions that we may feel. When it comes to whether or not we want to do something, it's such an instinct, it's such a reflex in our day-to-day life, our day-to-day operations that we don't think about it. But I mean, let's boil it down to its core. Let's see what we can take away. So, first questions: would you tell a joke to your friends? I'm sure, right? It's pretty straightforward. We all would. That is inherently a risk. You tell a joke, maybe people don't find it funny. I have that happen a lot. Maybe people just don't care or they don't hear you, but we still kind of do it. People still tend to tell jokes to their friends, and that's a reasonable behavior for us to go about. Now, stand-up comedy in front of the entire school, that's kind of a shot out there. That's pretty dang far. I would not do that. Getting up and on stage and performing for 10 minutes of just constant jokes, trying to get people to laugh, that is so difficult. And so none of us would say that we would want to do that. And yet the risk of telling a joke is we're perfectly comfortable with. And so where does that kind of come from? That's what we're going to hope to lead with this discussion a little bit further. Would you ask a question in class, understand something better? A lot of people say yes. And I'm so glad that's something people are comfortable with, because I'll tell you right now, during Zoom schooling, that was something a lot of people were not comfortable with. A lot of teachers would ask, "Does anyone have any questions?" And yes, half the class had no idea what was going on, and yet people didn't want to be the one person to unmute and say, "Hey, we have no idea what's going on." And that's so interesting, because I mean, if we look at our primary goal of going to school is to learn, right? So quickly are we stuck in this, like, I don't want to learn because I'm more afraid of something, of judgment. Not sure. We'll get to it. Would you speak to the Science Olympiad team if asked to do so? Mr. Vole said, "Hey, can you prepare some short little speech about the competition or about our results?" Most people probably would do it. I mean, it's a stressor. It's an audience, and they're listening to what you have to say, usually. And with that comes this pressure of like having to perform and all of that. But yet we would still probably do it. Now, would these same people like seek out an opportunity, ask for an opportunity to do that? Maybe not as much. And so again, similar concept, and yet so different in our results. And then the last one is, would you start a conversation with a stranger? And that will lead us to a point down the line, but it's an interesting question that we don't really think about. Like, why is it that we get so uncomfortable with talking to strangers when they're just other people, right? And so in trying to quantify and trying to like figure out and grab onto why we have these different opinions, I was trying to like figure out like a reasoning for it. And it's difficult to put into words, but I mean, I gave it a shot. So ideally, right? Ideally, in a perfect situation, we would not need anyone else to tell us what's right or wrong. We would just say, "Hey, I know that I'm correct. I know that I'm incorrect. I know what's socially acceptable, and I'm going to do it." That is technically, if you want to get into a bunch of philosophy and epistemology and all that kind of stuff, that would be a perfect situation. Is we just completely agree on what's right and wrong, and we're good to go, and we don't need other people to tell us that. But do you trust your standards? I don't. I don't trust your standards. I don't trust my standards. Turns out, while it may be ideal for us to like just be so confident we know exactly what we're doing, No one actually is. And so, kind of as a society, we start to have these norms and values that we develop. And that actually connects to what I'm learning in sociology right now, and something we can talk about. Like, we have expectations as a culture as to what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and because of that, we look to others to determine that. And so, would you tell a joke to your friends? Sure, they're your friends. You expect them to give you grace when you're not funny. You expect them to enjoy your presence. Would you stand a comedy in front of a school? Maybe not. I mean, it's more people. You don't know everyone. You don't know what people are going to say or do, and so we constantly look out to other people as a way of defining what we should or should not do. Um, I wouldn't say that's ideal, right? Ideally, we'd be perfect on our own, but because of that, we end up looking towards other people. And so that's kind of what this summary sentence is. Until we're satisfied with our standards of what's right and wrong, which none of us will ever truly achieve, but we can get to better places. We must rely on external sources to validate, to confirm, to reject what we should and shouldn't do when it comes to raising your hand in class, or asking someone for help, or stopping someone on the street and asking them a question. And so that seems to be the trend. But if you want to get into the more like darn, just darn, because not everyone is trustworthy. I mean, that's not a revelation to anyone, right? Just a few examples. Like, if your friend has a C in math and you're out for the day, would you trust them to take notes for you? Like, probably not, right? Like, they're probably a good person, since they're your friend, but they haven't demonstrated knowledge of, or understanding of what they're doing, and so that you may not want to trust them with how you perform in that class, in them taking notes for you. Uh, in in a similar situation, right? Taking that concept of trusting someone and applying it to social situations. If you have a classmate who is like a known troublemaker, like a bully, and everyone knows it, and they say something weird about you, or they have some strange opinion about you, like, do you trust their opinion? I mean, no, none of us probably would say that we would. And yet, when that situation happens, we kind of feel it, right? If someone, like some twerp, just goes out and calls you a name or whatever, like I've experienced this. You get like worked up, it's frustrating, and yet it shouldn't matter, but it does matter. And so, tying back to that guiding principle, emotions do not always line up with reasons. We emotionally can feel this distrust, or this anger, or this frustration with how people are judging us. But the fact of the situation is, if someone's just a twerp, why would we ever want to care about their opinion? Um, since this is a Science Olympiad class, this has actually happened, believe it or not, quite a few times. If a Division A student comes in and criticizes your teaching style, should you never teach again? Wow, I wonder how often that's happened before. Yeah, it happens a lot. And you want to look at, again, it's a similar concept. Like, if someone who's new to Science Olympiad, who has no experience in this whatsoever, comes in and says, hey, you're not doing a good job. Like, okay, you can take that criticism and you can say, okay, can I fix what I'm doing? Can I reevaluate it and do better? Sure, that's healthy. That's great. We should all do that. But should that rock your boat, as in, like, oh, I am a failure because this fifth grader said that I did not teach this concept well and I'm never going to teach again? Probably not. We probably shouldn't do that. And so we're starting to see this trend of why is it that we value some people's opinions and not value other people's opinions, and it just gets bigger and bigger. So you'll see me keep coming back to a bigger and bigger situation. But I mean, if someone is like genuinely hurting, like just really having a bad day, um, would you care what that person thinks about you if you were to reach out to them? Or would you care about what your friends think about you if you were to reach out to them? I bring this point up because I can promise you it's something you will see once you start to look for it. And so we have to start to think about, like, what is it that we're looking for when we're looking for other people to validate what we're doing or reject what we're doing. Ultimately, it kind of has this bold summary sentence again, it's you have the ability to determine what opinions to respect. It's up to you to figure out whether you respect or disagree with someone's opinion. It's up to you to determine whether you will take offense to it or not, or whether you'll adhere to it or not. And so now, knowing that, we want to try to figure out how we get there. I'll rehash this phrase another way before we do, though. Everyone deserves a voice, right? First Amendment, freedom of speech, all of that. Not everyone deserves to be listened to. That's something that I heard for the first time, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and it's something that stuck with me, right? Because everyone has the right to say what they want to say and say whatever they want about you and what you're doing. But you don't have to listen to them. You don't have to take that to heart. You don't have to let that affect you, especially when you're trying to do something for the greater good. And so when we get to that point, right, we get to that point where we're not sure about what we're doing, we're not sure why we're doing it, there's kind of like a way we can think through about other people's opinions or about other people's status in our life. And so I worked my hardest to try and figure out a way to put that into like a tangible checklist. And so here's the best shot I've got. Credibility checklist. There's 4 concepts, 4 ideas to bring to mind when you're trying to figure out whether you trust someone's opinion or not, and whether by extension you can find the confidence to do something. And so the first one is, has this person earned your respect? Very straightforward. Have they demonstrated over time that they have experience in what you're talking about? Do they tend to be a good person more often than not? Things of that like that. Are they good people? Do you trust their opinion on this situation? And then kind of honing in on that a little bit more, like, what has this person earned your respect in? Because there are a lot of people who are very, very well versed in a subject matter. They're really good at a class, or they're really good at art, or they're really good at communicating with other people and things like that. But those skills don't translate to other fields necessarily. And so if you have a lot of respect for someone who is really good at writing in your class, does that inherently mean that you trust their opinion on what's right and wrong in the world? I mean, probably not. If someone is really charismatic and outgoing, oh wow, they're like the life of the party, like, should you value their opinion as to whether you should do something or not to help someone else? Like, that doesn't inherently translate. And so when it comes to earning respect, you want to make sure that the respect that you're looking for is specific to the situation that you're talking about. If it's the confidence to go up and stand in front of the class and do a presentation, and someone is like judging you for that, then that's not really your problem, right? That's their choosing to do something weird, and you don't respect that, and therefore their opinion just kind of matters a little bit less. In similar vein, does a person have your respect in this specific moment? There are a lot of times where people who are very good or very, very confident or very well versed in some skill are just having a bad day. Maybe they've had something going on in their home life, or some emotional well being's at risk, or they're just having a really, really tough time, and they may act out of character. I mean, I've seen it myself. I've been that person myself. Just because someone has a track record of being really good at something, or being really admirable, or as in like you should respect their opinion as to whether something is acceptable or not, that doesn't mean in the heat of the moment that their opinion is necessarily good if they're dealing with something themselves. And so keeping in mind respect, what this person has done to earn your respect, and whether this person has your respect in the moment, are things that you can kind of use to figure out whether someone's opinion on what you're doing is worth listening to or not. A second point is influence. So what influence does this person have over your life? When it comes to like teachers or bosses or your parents, those people have influence over your life more than your classmate does, or more than a student does. And so if your parents are asking you to do something that you don't feel comfortable doing, you don't have the confidence for, consider why they're asking you to do it. Do they have your best interest in mind? If so, are they seeing something that you're not seeing? There are quite a few examples where I thought my parents were crazy for doing something and they made me do it anyway. And I am glad they made me do it because I could not imagine going about life without it. An example is musical theater. My mom forced me into joining a musical in fourth grade. I did not feel comfortable joining a musical in fourth grade. I had a really horrible tryout experience. And 8 years later, I'm still doing like musicals for fun because I like it. Um, that's something that where my mom had my best interest in mind. My mom could see things that I was not able to see at the time as a fourth grader. And because she had influence over my life, I had to trust what she was saying was the right call for for the situation in which I was lacking confidence. And so keeping that in mind, like what influence does this person have over your life? Are these people trying to do something to help you and you're not able to see it? Are they affecting, or if it's a teacher, right? And they're in charge of your grade, like that's something to keep in mind as you're trying to find a confidence to do stuff. When your teacher is a stakeholder or is a member of an audience that you're trying to appeal to. My favorite part of this checklist, the easiest one to start with, the one that I use basically every day, absolute favorite, is how much longer will I know this person? So I'll tell you right now, there are so many times where in my high school experience, my middle school experience, I was like, oh man, I just like, that was just so awkward. It was just so bad. Um, and I just thought like, oh, like I can't even think about it right now. But the fact of the matter is, when I left middle school, I didn't see that person again. When I left high school, I haven't seen that person again either. And so, recognizing that, like, the people that you're going to come across, maybe they just don't really impact your life. I know there's already like at least one of you who's going to call me out and say that I'm contradicting myself with my message earlier in the summer about how you never know what influence people are going to have in your life. So I can give you a couple examples. Um, there was a student in middle school who was very quiet, who I talked to maybe 3 times. But one of those times, I was like, she did something with her hair. I think it's like a purple streak in her hair, and I was like, "Hey, that looks really nice." After middle school, never saw her again, completely gone until I moved into college and found out she's living in the room right there, like next door. Um, you talk about like whoa, like that shouldn't be happening, and yet here it is. And so I know there's that duality of like, oh, you'll never see these people again, or you'll see this person again. You should be nice to everyone. Like it's kind of a weird mixture, but by and large, as a general rule, asking how much longer you'll know someone is a fantastic way of figuring out whether you can find the confidence to do something if that person's in your audience, if you will. A much easier example is like you're going to the grocery store and you I don't know, you drop something, you spill something, and you're so sorry, so embarrassed. Like you're probably never going to see any of those employees ever again. Just by nature of timing and locations and options, like you're never going to see that person again. And so as long as you do what's right, as long as you apologize, try to help if you can, you don't need to worry about like being a recurring memory they have when they're going to bed. Like, oh, I had a great day. Oh, there was that one kid 4 years ago who did that one thing, and that was super funny. Not something you need to worry about. You're not going to be in their life, and so it's okay if something goes wrong, or it's okay if you want to try and do something a little bit socially risky and trying to be funny or trying to do something nice for someone. And that's perfectly a wonderful way of looking at it. On the flip side, on the much more serious side, the societal implications of your actions, social responsibility, moral good versus evil. If you're doing something that helps someone, that should play a role in figuring out whether you're going to do that thing or not. Um, an example of this is like complimenting someone's t-shirt, right? Awkward, sure. Weird, a little bit. Also, you're giving them a compliment. They appreciate that. For a lot of people, those compliments stick with them. I still remember compliments I've gotten. I got a compliment on my haircut in 7th grade. I was standing next to a rope ladder. The rope was black. It's like a black rope ladder with like beads everywhere. I still remember that compliment. Okay, so if your action is going to help someone else to do good for the world, do good for society, it's a cliche. We're gonna keep saying it. If your action is gonna do that, that should definitely start to sway your decision making as to whether you'll do that thing or not. Yes, you may lack the confidence to do it, but also you're doing something for someone. That's a big deal. That contrasts the idea of like, I'm just going to ask a question for my own personal gain, or I'm just going to ask for help for my own personal gains, things like that. That's very much personal. Sure, it can help someone, but the general principle is if you're able to help someone or you're making a difference, consider that in your decision making as to whether it's socially acceptable or not to do that thing. And so that's kind of the big impactful one, because that ends up playing the biggest role in interactions. I think it's the crux of this class, and so we want to focus on it. And so looking at some kind of applications, right? I've already alluded to a few, but we can look at some more. Top left corner, you can see the general outline. How much respect do you have for this person? How much influence do they have in your life? When are you going to see them ever again? And what's the societal implications of doing that thing? And so, our first example: while on vacation, you're lost. You want to ask a stranger for help, right? Kind of awkward, especially if you don't know the language. I'll tell you that right now. But guess what? Mathematically speaking, you will never see this person again. And so if you fumble through your broken Spanish, if you try to get your phone out to try and point to what you're looking for, and they just shoot you down or they ignore you or whatever, like, you'll never see them ever again. So go for it. Take the risk. Do the thing. Don't worry about it. Because what difference is that going to make in a month, in a year? That kind of long-term mindedness is something that a lot of people don't always think about, and yet it influences our day-to-day decisions that we make every single day. And so it's just super simple. Like, you'll never see the person again. Go for it. A second, more serious point is when leaving a study session, you thank the wait staff. Does it sound familiar? It should sound familiar. When leaving a public study session, you thank the wait staff. Yeah, little awkward, especially when none of you guys can drive. It's a little bit strange for that, but I mean, let's go through our checklist, right? If they think that you're weird for thanking them, that's not on you. That's on them. Like, that is just so strange. And so if they like sit there and they judge you, like, oh, what was that kid doing? Like, that's not a you problem. You don't need to worry about that. And so don't worry about it. Like, don't let that be a factor in your decision. Similarly, you will probably never see them again. And so if you fumble through your words, or if you do the weird, like, switching the order of your words, like I've done quite a few times, and you make a fool of yourself, if it goes to the worst case scenario, you'll never see them again. Don't worry about it. And then we get to that last point. Like, you have the chance to actually help someone. It's such a small thing, right? Saying thank you. It's such a small thing. But for people, especially people who are working so hard to try and please in the wait staff and in the front house and back house staff of restaurants or in public spaces, people driving around, transportation. There was when we did our study session at Panera, and it's not cheesy, but I did want to try and say thank you to the people who were cooking in the back. And one person was like, she stopped and she's like walked over, was like, hey, thank you, buddy, thank you for saying that. And it's like, that didn't cost me anything, right? Never going to see that person again. And yet, for just a brief moment, you made like the net of the world, good and evil, you made it just like a little bit better. And so that's pretty cool. And even if you lack the confidence to do it in the moment, you can find it through our reasoning, right? Another, we've already mentioned it before, but you're asked to prepare a presentation for the team. Again, scary. I know it's scary from experience, but Mr. Evola believes in your best interest. He believes it's the right thing for you to do to help you. And also, you have respect for your teammates when they're kind people, right? By and large. If your teammates are not kind, then they lose your respect, and therefore you don't care about their opinion. It's like this conditional caring. Conditional caring about someone's opinion is really what defines this. And so if someone makes a snide comment about you as you're up there, like, just throw that opinion out. Like, it's inherently a bad opinion. You recognize that. And so don't need to worry about it. And then kind of on a more somber note, again, we keep going up and down the emotional gauntlet here, if you will. But while walking with a friend, you notice another student crying. So when it comes to confidence, like, this is why it matters. This is the reason I want to present this. Like, sure, presentations are great. Like, good for you to go thank people, but like, this is why confidence is so important. So let me kind of backtrack with a story. This happened this past school year, as I'm walking with my friend. She's just so great. She's so nice, very kind, like really smart and like hardworking with all of her classes. We're walking and it's a free period, and so there's no one around. And as we're walking, we pass this girl who's like, she's just like sobbing. Like, she's just like bad day, horrible time, not sure what's going on. And she just keeps walking. And so like, okay, I stop and I run back like, hey, are you okay? Like, are you sure you're good? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. And she keeps walking, and wasn't able to talk to her, wasn't able to figure out what's going on. And that happens, right? We try to help people and we don't always get that. But when I went back to my friend, who was just such a nice person, like such a great person, she was like, oh my gosh, Josh, like, I wish I had the confidence to do that. Like, that's so nice. And like, oh, like, my ego is like fantastic, and I'm so like happy and I'm warm and all that. And then it kind of hit me. Like, it was about 3 minutes later. It kind of hit, and it was like, it was rough. Like, okay, you're a nice person, but because you didn't feel confident enough, you let someone who was possibly having the worst day of her month or the worst day of her year just keep walking. Like, that's not good. That's disturbing. The fact that fear can be so strong that it overrules our empathy for someone who's suffering, that it overrules our desire to help people and to work together to get through this tough life. Like, that's frightening. And so when we talk about why it's important to be confident, it's because you need to be confident so you can actually make these differences. It doesn't matter how nice you are to your friends on a good day. It doesn't matter how sweet you are to your teachers and picking up trash and all that. Like, if you let someone just walk by in their suffering, paralyzed by fear, that's just horrible. And so that's why I bring this up. You have the opportunity to be the sole influence in someone's just worst time. And people around you may not, oftentimes don't, have the confidence to do something about it, because it is scary, right? You don't want to be judged as you approach someone, or you don't know what they're doing, or are they going to be mad at you? Like, it's a whirlwind of emotions. They're feeling emotional. You're feeling emotional. It's just all over the place. And yet you have to do something about it. Like, you can't just let that happen and move on. With a good conscience, like, that's the basic of, like, that's like the fundamental basics of life. It's, people are living, people are hurting. We work together to make that hurt go away. And so I would hope that in using certain outlines or thought processes, whatever you end up pulling away from this, whether it's this outline I've got in the top left corner or whether it's something you just kind of figure out all on your own, I'm hoping that you'll be able to use the idea of finding confidence to actually apply it and do something about it. And that's why I feel this is so important, because having the confidence to do things just serves as a foundation for so much, especially when we talk about trying to help others, when we talk about trying to help the people around us in our communities or our team. And so whatever you end up using, whether it's this outline or something of your own creation, I hope you can start to have a tool set, a toolkit to process your fear or your lack of confidence in a given situation and turn that into confidence for when it's appropriate. And so with that, let's take a short break. Let's do a minute, maybe let's do 2 minutes, stretch, get up, stretch, grab a snack, grab a drink if you need to, and then we'll come back and we'll switch back into our second setup here. Alrighty. As people start to trickle back in, we're going to start to transition to our second kind of topic of the night. This is more of an actual leadership part of a leadership class, and this makes more sense when we talk about working as a team and things like that. Organizational structure. Our goal is to identify the basics of organizational structure, specifically within the Science Olympiad context. As it turns out, organizational structure is everywhere, but when we look at it specifically in Science Olympiad, we can make those connections easier to what we should do on a day-to-day basis. And so before we even talk about structure, we're going to talk about role. Like, what is your role in a team, in a program, in a business, in a school? That kind of starts off with some questions that you could ask yourself if you wanted to try and identify what role you have. And so here are 3 really simple ones. What are you working on regularly, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Second question, who are you working with or taking direction from? And then, what are your roles or duties for uncommon or emergency situations? And so I feel like, in general, that kind of encompasses like everything. You have your day-to-day goals, tasks, missions, whatever you want to call it. You have the people you're working with who are leading you, or who you're working with, or who you are leading. And then you have the strange things. Something's going wrong. What do I do? Something's going crazy. What's my job? Things like that. And so if you take that in the context of like Science Olympiad, right? For our competitors, what tasks or goals are you working on regularly? You're studying, trying to be the best student you can be, trying to compete at the highest level you can, trying to get the highest score, whatever you want to call it. Who are you working with? Fellow students, fellow peers. Who are you taking direction from? Captains, coaches, etc. And emergency situations, not really a thing you have to worry about, right? You contrast that with the role of an assistant coach. Assistant coaches do no competing in our program. Their sole job is to manage other people, to work with other people, to put people up for success. They are taking direction from Mr. Evola directly. They're leading students and captains in their adventures. In an emergency, guess what? Assistant coaches actually do have to do something. We've seen that been activated a little bit here and there. It's not something we enjoy using, but there are specific duties that assistant coaches have to go through when something's going wrong with If a student's experiencing something that's going wrong or there's an emergency at school, there are certain responsibilities that you need to be aware of. And so by asking those questions, you can kind of identify what role you fill in an existing structure. Now, if that structure doesn't exist, right? If you're doing a group project, or if you're kind of in this weird nebulous of like a social group and no one's really sure what's going on, and you're trying to figure it all out, there are questions you can ask where you can kind of create your own role. And so, like, when you have the power, when you have the ability to do something, what do you want your role to look like? What do you want to define your role as? And so, a good way to start: what skills do you have? What are you good at doing? What are you good at solving? What problems can you resolve? You can see this with how Tim and I kind of came into Sierra Vista, right? We each have skills and tools that we're bringing that are different, and yet by bringing those tools in, we're able to define our own role and make room for ourselves as we go about setting up this program. A similar question: how much do you want to work with others on a regular basis? That includes people you're leading, people who are leading you, your peers. Do you kind of want to be on your own, doing your own thing, and occasionally reaching out? Do you want to be in the front of the battlefield, like getting everyone together and constantly working with everyone? That's a question, a very simple question of defining where you want to stand in that whole discussion. And so, how much you want to work with others is able to set you up for that role that you're trying to create for yourself. And then another recurring theme we keep seeing is, what do you actually want to get better at? So if you are struggling with something, if you are not the best at leading or long-term planning or organization or public speaking, you can put yourself in the position to do that. And that's what some of us are trying to do. That's what we want to encourage at Sierra Vista. And so, keeping in mind what you want to do with yourself, what you want to do with your skill set, what you want to do with your abilities, and wanting to grow that, absolutely something that you should keep in mind when you're trying to set a role up. And so, on this next slide, we have what's called an org chart. Just by show of hands, has anyone seen an org chart before or knows what an org chart is? Good. I get to teach something today. So, an org chart is like if you gave a second grader a bunch of crayons and told them to write the names of the people in an organization and then put little lines between them. And it's super cool. You can look up org charts for various companies on the internet. There are some really interesting ones out there. The basic premise is who responds to who answers to who. And so if someone is an employee, they would answer to a manager, a local manager, a team leader of some sort. Depending on how big the company is, that manager could report to a regional director, who then reports to a large geographic area, who then reports to the VP of that division, who reports to the president, who reports to CEO, who reports to stakeholders and shareholders. And so you're able to kind of see that go all the way up the chain, which is really cool. Here's a really basic one. So when I said second grader, I meant it. This is kind of a rough sketch of what Sierra Vista's org chart looks like, and it's the basic one, right? We don't have Mr. Munoz. You can put Mr. Munoz, Dr. Patel in Mr. Evola's spot, whatever you want to say there. Mr. Evola would probably have our lines be more horizontal. I think they should be more vertical, as in we answered to him. But that's up for debate. Assistant coaches, it's kind of a weird status right now with Tim and myself, because you're not really like answering to us, and so Mr. Evola is more in charge of what you're doing. But we still work with you all the time, and we want to help you guys. And so there's that kind of basic premise. If you want to expand this further, you could divide students up into different strands. You could say you have like a strand leader who goes to one captain. The captains come together, then we go to one assistant coach who works with another assistant coach who goes to Mr. Evola directly, and it gets more complicated. But I just want to show you what an org chart looks like. And so the next time you see it, you will know what they are supposed to be and what they're for, and maybe even how to interpret them. It's super simple. Again, second grader, but it's something to keep in mind. And so when we talk about organizations, especially in like a team context, very much symbiotic. Your organization is nothing without your upstream, your downstream, and your peers. I don't need to explain what that means because it's pretty self-explanatory. But I chose upstream and downstream for a reason, and we'll talk about why we say that in a little bit. Guess what? Respect, still a thing. You still have to earn it. There is no gimmies in organizations, in leadership. Just because you are older, just because you have more experience, does not automatically make you an effective leader. That is still something you need to earn. Similarly, just because you are listening to someone else who's giving you directions on what to do, doesn't mean that you are like a crazy, just absolutely crazy. You have to earn their respect too. It goes both ways, and that's something I know you guys know already. But putting it into words is so important to define kind of the foundations that we're coming from. And so you get into controversial territory when you bring up businesses and personal responsibility. But when it comes to a team, very straightforward. It's your job to help the people upstream, help them lead effectively, and set up the people that you're leading for success. I think our captains kind of fit into this discussion perfectly, right? Because you have to set the coaches up to help them lead effectively, and also work with the students to make sure they're effective in their studying, in their life, in their development. And so that working up and downstream is very achievable for everyone. It's something we should all aspire to. So let's talk about the semantics of upstream, downstream, and why I'm using that. In a professional context, you will never hear someone say upstream or downstream unless they are part of one of those companies that like pays you to recruit people who then pay to recruit other people. You know, those controversial like pyramid schemes. Yeah, that's when you hear upstream and downstream. But the reason I say it here is because with middle and high schoolers, it's very easy for me to say bosses, and suddenly people somehow start to get really bossy. It's such a common thing. I'm not sure why that is, but obviously it means the same thing, right? The people who are in charge, the people who are listening, and yet by saying that, it kind of creates these preconceptions in our mind of what that means to lead, what it means to follow, and don't really want that. So I'm going to say upstream and downstream. You know what it means, but it's a gentler way of saying people who are in charge, people who are trying to follow. And so with that, there are two clarifications I want to make. The first is related to worth. So your worth is not defined by where you stand in an organization. That's just not, that concept is just false, completely false, not true. If you want to get into philosophy, if you want to get into all the discussions on ethics and morality and all that stuff, we can talk about what inherent value means. We can talk about things like that, and what it means to be alive, and what it means to have good and bad. But that's not really relevant to this, so we can do that later. Still, just know that you bring inherent value as a person, and then also you earn respect of others by being successful, by doing what you need to do, by doing your job, by demonstrating you have knowledge, demonstrating you have expertise, demonstrating you have ability to do things that are difficult. And so your worth and value isn't defined by where you stand in that organization. It's defined by what you bring to the table as in your position. It's not superior or inferior. It's what you bring. And that's very important. And I keep emphasizing it because I don't want people to think that like boom, I've got a leadership position. That means I'm in charge. You're doing what I say, because that's definitely not true. Leadership is a privilege, and it's something like you just can't take for granted. It's just not. You just can't do it, because the second you do it, you lose respect to the people who you're leading. You lose respect to people who are your bosses, who are looking at you, and suddenly that position is gone. And so it's very much similar to the idea of being proud that you're in this class. Like the second you take advantage of it, it disappears. And so that kind of conditional leadership is something to keep in mind as you're going out. And you will see a lot of leaders who it gets to their head very quickly. The smallest bit of power gets to their head, and they just take it out on people. You will see that, and that is frustrating. And so don't be that person. With that being said, kind of looking at the different roles in an organization, if you're looking upstream, so as you're following others, as you're trying to figure out what the best way for you to add to a group, add to a discussion, add to a team, a few bullet points to keep in mind. In a lot of ways, you're the eyes and ears. So our coaching staff, we have one coach who is regularly at Sierra Vista. That's Mr. Evola. All the assistant coaches and myself and Tim, we're not seeing what's happening on the day-to-day basis. And so I'm not saying rat out your teammates, but I am saying make your leaders aware of what's going on, things that you can see that maybe they can't see. That's something that you can bring as an individual. You can bring that to your team, and you can help people in that sense. That's a wonderful thing to do. I'll keep the anatomy analogy going, hands and feet. Like, if someone asks you to do something, execute to the best of your ability. Straightforward. But in that way, you are kind of the machine that the leaders are trying to put into motion, and you're able to make that work, and you're able to have that progress work towards your goal, and whatever that may look like. Respect to the level of respect they have earned, especially when you are serving as an example for other people, be that your peers or be that people downstream. The best way I can explain this is titles. So again, when it comes to titles, people kind of get into the whole, like, I'm special, give me the this and that title. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, you should always say Dr. Patel, right? There's never a time where it'd be appropriate to use like first name or anything like that, because Dr. Patel has worked hard to not only earn the professional title, but also earn the respect of the students who he's leading. Similarly, this is up for personal debate, but I don't think it's appropriate to say Evola. I say still, for some reason, Mr. Evola, for my own well-being and thoughts, but also because by saying that, I'm showing as an example to you guys that I believe that's the appropriate thing to say. Now, I've told you guys you can call me Josh, but that's not something I've said to everyone in the team. And so if you call me Josh in a familial context like this, that's fine, right? But if we're out and I'm trying to get people to focus on this project, or try and get people to clean up the campsite, or get people set up for an award ceremony, and there are other students who maybe aren't paying attention, like it could be on you to say, hey, Coach Josh, what do we need to be doing? Again, this isn't for like to get the ego, make me feel all good and vibey. It's showing others around you that you respect your leaders, that you are giving them the respect they need. Not necessarily not need. That's a poor phrasing, but the respect they've earned, and demonstrating that. And so that's something that I would encourage you to think about. If you're in a personal context, use whatever you've been told you're allowed to use. If you are in a public context with other people, you can't go wrong with going with the most formal thing that you know. Next bullet point, look for ways to grow, look for ways to have an opinion, but still follow directions. A common thing people with strong opinions on situations come about is they're in a situation where they think they can do it better. A lot of times they're right, a lot of times they're wrong, but still, based on this, based on the structure that is put in front of you, ultimately you still have to listen to people who are telling you what to do. And so even if you disagree with something, you can offer that feedback respectfully, right? Maybe that'll start a discussion, maybe not, but ultimately it is submitting to authority where that's appropriate. And unless it's a moral argument where it's like, I want you to go sabotage that team, that's up for debate, right? But if it's not a clear moral dilemma, then ultimately it is respect the authority that you are told to respect, and maybe debrief it later, maybe discuss it later, talk with someone else, do what you need to do. But looking for ways to grow and have your own opinions on things helps you grow as a leader when you're put in that position to lead others. Support and affirm your leaders. Ooh, that's a big one. Guess what? People who lead don't have things figured out either a lot of the time. They just have it more figured out, a little bit more figured out than you in this moment. this is an example. The go-to example I use is like teachers. Your teachers are great. They work hard. They want to communicate information. They care about you. But they also a lot of times just have stuff going on in their lives. A lot of my teachers have had personal issues. They've had family issues. They've had conflicts that they've mentioned. They've had professional concerns with the people they're working with. They've had all kinds of just crazy things going on. And so if you can look for a way to affirm or credit, or as simple as like thank someone who's you're working with, that can go so far, especially when people are doing it without thanks. They're doing it without that reward, that instant gratification of making a difference. And especially if they're struggling with something. We all have issues that we're dealing with. And so if you're able to affirm those people, that's absolutely is a way to make a difference. And this last bullet point is something that my dad taught me when I was 7. And again, one of those things that just kind of stuck with me. Look for ways to solve a problem before being asked, right? If a problem arises or you see a problem is going to arise, figure out a way to take care of it before it becomes a problem. You don't need someone to tell you that it's a problem for you to do something about it. And so don't be afraid to just like take a look at it, figure out what needs to be done. If you can't do it by yourself or if you need permission, maybe go to the person upstream, go to your leader and say, hey, we have this problem. Here's 3 solutions on how we could tackle it. Would you like me to do one of them or something different altogether? Suddenly, you're turning a problem into solutions for your leaders, which makes their job easier, which makes them happier, which makes your job easier, which makes you happier. And it all just kind of comes together. And so that's something definitely to keep in mind. Pivoting opposite direction, looking downstream when you're a leader, when you're in a position where you're working with other people, providing the resources needed for them to succeed, right? A question as simple as, hey, what do you need from me to help you? What can I give you right now that would help you in this situation, that'll help you develop, that'll help you learn, whatever that may look like? A point that took me way too long to figure out is you're leading people. They have feelings, they have emotions, they have things go well and things go badly. You can't just treat them like a chess game and expect things to work out. And so when things are going wrong, like be aware of that, address that, and tackle it head on. Don't be afraid of of addressing those issues, because these are people with their own lives, their own families, their own stories. You're a character in their story, and so keep that in mind when you're working with other people. You want to lead them and not the responsive computer that maybe would be easier to work with. Providing genuine affirmation and support. Same thing as when you work upstream, right? Hey, good job today. I'm glad you're doing that. Hey, that was really good. It's so simple. There's research articles, there's newspaper articles about if you want to look into the science behind affirmation, but it's so simple, and so it's something you should bring into your toolbox when you're working with other people. Living by example, self-explanatory. This last one's a bit more complex. Equilibrium does not mean stationary. So I am going to go just a couple minutes over time. I hope you'll bear with me. But equilibrium, for those who aren't in a chemistry-related discipline, is a stage where, technically speaking, the rates of reactions forward and backward in a set of reactions are equal. What translated to English, it means that like you've kind of reached a point where things are no longer changing. It's very much kind of stable in its state, but it doesn't mean it's frozen. It means things are still changing. It's just they're changing together, and you're not having net change, overall change. And so, put in the leadership sense, I'll tell you right now that I've read a lot of internet forum comments through the past year and a half related to work and bosses and how the pandemic's affected that. And the most common complaint is, hey, our department raised profits by 6% this year. And so instead of giving us a raise, they are cutting expenses by 2%. So then the executives can bring in an 8% increase in their salary, right? Or hey, we worked really hard during the pandemic in this hospital, And so now we want to cut back even more labor, right? Like, okay, just because a team got through something doesn't mean you should make it worse for them. It means that maybe that's the bare minimum they need. In Science Olympiad, if a student is doing very well in an event in studying or something like that, that doesn't mean you just like hands off, like let them on their own. Like still continue to offer them that support that they need. Like what resources do you need? How can we make it even better? Things like that. Now, the flip side of that is you get to like micromanagement. Like now you're focusing on every single thing that they're doing, and you don't want to do that. So manage resources to get to a point where it's at equilibrium, and then stop managing it. Stop trying to like move the pawns around and fix the little system. Let the system work. If it's working, let it work. But continue to add to it. Continue to add the resources it needs to thrive and to keep going further and further. And so the last kind of major point is peers. We looked up, we looked down, and now we're at the same level. You have a common goal, common role. I'm so proud that I rhymed that. That involves elements of both upstream and downstream. That means affirming, supporting when needed, but it's also not always needed. And so when there's a conflict in a strand of students who are having some issues, right? If you're a student in that strand, that doesn't mean it's your problem. Maybe if you want to help, absolutely, more than welcome to help. Help the situation, make it better for everyone. But that's not your job. That would be the job of captain, coach, right? And so if you can help, if you can support, go for it. If you can do so without like limiting yourself, absolutely. But recognizing that not every problem that comes into, or not every problem that your peers face is inherently your problem, will help you kind of delineate between those issues that they're facing, what you're facing, what your leaders need to take care of, what you need to take care of, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll say the point again, look for ways to solve problems before being asked. If you can keep that in mind, I mean, that'll help you in Science Olympiad, that'll help you in high school and college, that'll help you in the job market. It's such a simple skill, and yet people are so appreciative of it. And so, with that, we've covered 2 lessons on drastically different things. There will be another set of questions coming up in Google Classroom later tonight. They are very simple. Again, I'd ask you wait 48 hours, maybe to wait to the weekend to answer them. It just gives you time to kind of rehash these ideas over and over again. And the first in-person homework assignment is you need to look for one way to help your upstream, help a captain or coach this week without being asked, and look for one way to help a student or a peer, one of your teammates this week. And you're going to document it because I asked you that on the Google Classroom. And so I know we've got like competitions going on. I know it's kind of an awkward time, but still, it's simple as like, maybe it's as simple as just checking in on someone who you don't talk to very often. Maybe it's as simple as like, hey, what do you need today? Do you need any resources? Hey, can I go buy you boba when I come over? Like, I'm just saying that'd be a pretty cool one. Look for one way to help someone this week. That would be great. Good seeing you guys. I'm going to turn the music back on. Obsession with Eyes. What a great song. You're more than welcome to stick around if you want to kind of debrief or talk about some other stuff. But other than that, it was so great seeing you guys. And we'll see you back next week for another lesson.